I would just pray that women would be able to find a love for themselves that didn't hurt this bad.
Ooh, to find a love for themselves that didn't hurt this bad.
I want everybody to have love, and I think that our brothers behind bars, they deserve love. I just want them to, the sisters that love them, to have an opportunity at a love that don't have to hurt so bad.
Rob, you coming to sit in the seat?
It is a pleasure to be here.
Mr. Richardson.
Yes, ma'am.
How are you?
I am absolutely well.
I mean, you kind of the man of the hour. You why we here. You the reason there was a time.
I know, right? Thank God for that woman there, right?
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Man, I can thank you enough for your mama and your daddy for having you. And thank you most importantly for having us on your show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What an ordeal. Mm-hmm. 21 years, 4 days in prison. It's a lot of time to think through some stuff. Mm-hmm. A lot of time to sit with yourself.
Yes, indeed. I appreciate you for giving me them 4 days. People be acting like they don't exist. If you spend any day in prison.
Them was probably the hardest.
Right.
Them 4 days was probably the hardest.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. But, you're talking about quite the journey. And I wouldn't wish incarceration upon my worst enemy. It is truly a deplorable, a dishonoring space to be in when, just every element of your life you're asking for permission for. And it's just, like I said, just something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy.
Yeah. When you got sentenced and you knew you had to do this time, what was the one thing that went through your mind? What were you saying to yourself? Because I know you said over and over, I won't quit. But I know there had to have been some moment of agony that you experienced when you got sentenced.
Before agony, Brandy, was, what would you say, dismay? Mm-hmm. And I say dismay because when he handed out the sentences, I could have swore to God he was talking to somebody else. I said, he got the paperwork messed up. Mind you, armed robbery at the time of my offense carried a minimum of 5 years, carried a maximum of 99 years. And to know that I had already been recommended for boot camp as a response to the sanctions for my charge, to know that the judge had sidestepped all of that and issued out a 60-year sentence to me, a 45-year sentence respectively to my nephew, I thought for certain that he was reading from the wrong page. And it took my my uncle to stand up in the background of the courtroom, and boy, he cursed from here to there. And he said, they ain't killed nobody. And those were kind of the words that, kind of stayed with me because, one, I'm thinking like, okay, they about to kick my uncle out the courtroom. Yeah. I don't have a whole lot of supporters in the courtroom at this moment. But in that moment, like you said, I was dismayed at first. And then after which I realized that this has got to be something more. I knew in that moment that this was some kind of calling that had been placed upon me. It was just a feeling.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And, I had, been in church, prior to, had read the story of Joseph, had read the story of many of the characters throughout the Bible. And I realized that, crazy enough, that many of the grandest of the stories that exist in the Bible, they are stories of incarceration. From the beginning all the way up to the murders of Saul turned Paul, and his transformation. So in that moment, like I said, it just felt like to me that it was just one of those moments that God had placed me in a space to learn a greater lesson with hopes that I would be able to teach a greater lesson to the larger public. And so just in that moment, I realized that, okay, it was like one of them Jesus Christ moments when he was sitting on the cross. And I know when Jesus was up there, I kind of think I know how he felt when he was talking about passing that bitter cup to somebody else. Yeah. This whole moment had been about Jesus. And now at this moment that, he's facing sanctions, it was in that moment that he was really wanting to forego the sanctions that they were trying to issue. But there was a coming to self kind of moment that I believe that Jesus had. And it was at the moment when he spoke the words, when he says, but if it's your will, then let thy will be done. Yeah. So in that moment, I knew that this was bigger than the judge. I knew it was bigger than the DA. I knew it was even bigger than the choices and the decisions that I had made to put myself in that situation to begin with. It was just up in that moment that I was going to have to figure out what the actual purpose for my incarceration was going to be. And so therein began my journey.
Wow. What was the purpose? When you look at that 21 years, what was the purpose? What was the biggest lesson?
To free others.
Hmm.
I started an argument probably about 2005 that stemmed from another young man that I met while I was incarcerated. He asked me to read his rap sheet one day. And in reading the rap sheet, he asked me could I interpret it for him so that he could maybe figure out like when he would be eligible for parole release. And after reading it, I realized that he had an upcoming date. And then after maybe about a week or two, he got another rap sheet. The second rap sheet that he got was no reflection of his parole release date. And he was like, well, why do you think they took my parole date? And I said, I don't know, maybe we should file a grievance on it. And so I filed a grievance for him. It went through the process. After it got so far through the process, they denied it at the warden's level, and then ultimately was denied at the Secretary of Department of Corrections level. And at that point, he was like, well, man, what do we do from right here? I said, well, if you allow me to, I said, I would love to really take this into a civil court matter because I think that their interpretation of the law is wrong. And he says, well, what makes you think that is wrong? I say, well, I've been wrestling with this issue here for quite some time right now, and I got a pretty good understanding of the English language. And just based on what I'm reading, it tends to suggest to me that what they're saying about your sanction is different than my interpretation of it. At any rate, his mom came to visit from Florida. I had been walking all over the prison trying to get other people to realize that we were entitled to something that we were being denied. And they didn't really have no qualms one way or the other. Many of them thought that they had been condemned to death, and they figured they, would just figure out how to do it in day-by-day installments. And so I started, kind of proselytizing throughout the prison and landed on 5 guys out of maybe hundreds of guys that I felt like I had talked to about the issue. But 5 guys were willing to join me in a class action suit. We didn't have money for an attorney, so I went around the prison, and my wife didn't have no more money for an attorney. My family didn't have no more money for an attorney. We were tapped. And I said, well, if we all put in on it, then we might all be able to put up, just enough to be able to get a lawyer. So the guy who I'm speaking of, he brought me to visit one day, and in bringing me to visit, he had me talk to his mom, who was visiting from Florida. And Mama Bev is her name. And she spoke with me, and in so doing, she says, well, baby, I don't understand the law, and I don't really know you. She says, but I have a discerning ear, and I know that what you're talking about resonates as truth to me. She says, find a lawyer, and I got half on the lawyer.
Wow.
That was all the motivation I needed, Miss Brandy. I went back down and I found another person to give me $750. I found somebody else that would commit to $1,250. I found somebody else
Talk about find a way.
Whew, boy, we found a way between myself and those 5 people. I said I would do the argument and y'all pay the money, and I'll find the lawyer. Fox was able to find a lawyer out of Baton Rouge, in fact, that stepped in and said that he would take the case, and he took the case. But fast forward, many years later, we were able to get a resolution through the legislative branch of government, and in that we were able to free more people than I ever thought we were going to free through that argument. When I first started arguing it, I thought it would maybe free about 300 to 500 people. I was denied from the judge on the grounds that he thought that it would open up a floodgate to other people who he thought would be coming asking for the same right. And that 300 to 500 people that I thought it would impact paled in comparison to the 3,000 plus people that now have a right to go home, to return back to their families. But it came as a result of an argument that I had put forth. And I knew now, looking back on it, then just saying that, to myself, had I never come to Angola State Penitentiary, who else would have figured this argument out?
Yeah.
So I knew in that moment that it was God's opportunity, or God's offering to me in that moment to say, rise to the occasion. And for me, the payoff, when it made sense to me, it made sense on the other side of it. One of the first books Fox sent me while I was incarcerated was called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And in it, he talked about the meaning for suffering. He was concentrated in a German prison. But the point I'm making in it is that when I came back and I realized that one day I was facing 297 years, sentenced to 61 calendar years inside a prison, sent there to die, not because I thought that that's what they sent me to do, but because the mockery that the district attorney made to me when he even offered me 61 years. You know what he told me, Miss Brandy?
No.
He told me that I got a deal for you today because I still had some outstanding charges for jury tampering that was associated with the armed robbery. I had already been sentenced to 60 years on the armed robbery, so I was facing 5 to 99 for each count of the jury tampering, which is how I was facing 297 years. He says, but I got a deal for you today. He said, the deal that I got for you today is 2 5-year sentences. He said, one of them, I'm going to put that one into the time that you've already served on this charge, so you've already finished that one. He says, the other one, I'm going to suspend 4 of the years. He says, but the 1 year that is left remaining, I'm going to run that one separate of the 60 that you're doing for the armed robbery. And as he walks out the door, he taps on the door and he says, bailiff. And he wanted the bailiff to let him out. And he turns back in this creepy looking kind of way. And he says, do you know why I gave you 61 years today? And gave you that deal that I offered you today? I said, no, sir, I really don't. I said, I assumed that you was trying to show me some leniency or whatever. He says, not quite. He said, the reason that I gave you the 61 years is because the last time that someone committed jury tampering in my town was in 1938. This was 1999. 61 years to date. He says, while you're doing your time in Angola, ponder on that.
Oh, my God.
Talk to me.
Oh, my God.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we think about how deep, when we talk about systemic racism, when we talk about institutionalized racism, when we talk about the prison pipeline, when we talk about all the prison and prison industrial complex, industrial prison complex, all the things.
Right.
When we talk about it, this is what we mean.
Mm-hmm.
That this is hundreds of years
Mm-hmm.
of diabolical behavior
Mm-hmm.
that has been impeded and input onto Black people.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think that we are free,
Mm-hmm.
we are constantly reminded, hold on, not quite.
Right.
I mean, before I let you go out the seat, because you know Fox, she gonna cool off, she coming back.
Right.
Fox gonna come back and close us out.
That's right.
I want you as a father, because just like you had to walk away because of the choices and decisions that you made. You had to walk away from your family
That's right.
for 21 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a husband, as a father, what did that do to you while you were sitting in that prison? What did it give you time to ponder as a father and those choices that you made? And then to get out and come back and to have to face your children and to be a father in this way?
I think in that moment, it made me have to repurpose the role of father and repurpose the role as husband, particularly as it related to my sons. I realized after reading a Men's Health magazine, it was for Father's Day edition, and in this particular edition of the Men's Health, it was talking about the amount of hours that the average father spends engaged with their children on a monthly basis. And I was really amazed to see that fathers who are at liberty spend on average about 8 hours a month engaged with their children out of a 30-day month cycle.
Wow.
And with that being said, I started doing the math in my own head and said, well, I get 2 visits a month. You know, if we get here early enough and leave late enough, I got twice the amount of time that the average father has to spend with his particular child. And I say, so if I be intentional about how I spend that time during my visitation, then I could be equally as impactful as the fathers that are on the street.
Wow.
So it was just in that moment, and like I said, again, reading this particular edition of the magazine, it made me think one further about coaches. And I think about the coaches that have championed people like Muhammad Ali, that have coached football greats, that we now know today, basketball greats that we now know today, just all of the sports. And the thing about the coach, I found myself similar, and that is that I'm not in the game, I'm not in the ring, I'm not on the court, not on the field, none of those things. I'm on the sideline, much like the coach. So I started to take on a role of coaching instead of a role of fathering.
Wow.
So it was in that moment that I realized that if I just coach from the sidelines, giving best practices to my children based upon a life lived, then I knew that my kids would be all right.
Wow. That is so powerful. I've never heard anyone ever explain it in that way. Because I know that it's got to be emotionally gripping and it's got to be definitely difficult on your own psyche. But to take on a role and reimagine and repurpose, that's something that's truly amazing. Truly amazing. Before you walk out to sea, I told you I was going to do 2 questions.
Right.
But then this is my last
All
one.
right.
Okay, Ron, this is my last question. Okay. And it's, if you could speak to your 1997 self, if you could speak to any man that is incarcerated right now, what would you say?
Never give up. Never give up. I think that is keeping in the spirit of the people that fought, died, and bled for the life that we now enjoy in the Americas. I think when we give up, we do a disservice to everything that they stood for, everything that they died for, everything that they bled for, everything that they argued for, everything that they protested for. I think we do a grave disservice to that when we give up. It's one thing to err, but it's another thing altogether different to give in to what it is that you've chosen for yourself. And so in that moment, I knew if you look at the movie Time, the shirt that I walk out of prison with says never give up. I made that shirt 10 years prior to walking out of prison in it. I knew that I was going to be a certain weight because I was going to work out to make sure that I would be able to fit that shirt. But I was in graphic arts and communications at the time, and I was strapped with an assignment, and the assignment was that I was supposed to make a billboard ad, and in making the billboard ad, the ad was supposed to do this, that, and the other, right? And it was supposed to be a compelling ad. And so I thought about it, and I said, well, you know what? I think T-shirts are some of the most compelling ads that I've ever witnessed, in terms of billboards, because unlike regular billboards, they walk, when they're on someone's back.
I mean, you used to wear your shirt culture. You're in Time
right,
One wearing
right.
The very culture shirt of the store, the first hip-hop store that y'all going to have in Shreveport.
Right.
Listen.
So that would be it. But in that moment, like I said, I created that shirt, but it was the last marathon that I had run inside of prison. While I was incarcerated, Fox and I had committed to running 7 marathons in a year to signify the number of times that a child of an incarcerated parent is likely to come to prison as a result of having a parent himself. So those 7 marathons that Fox would run outside of prison, and that I had convinced the wardens of the prison to allow us to run inside of the prison. Imagine trying to convince wardens to train people to run.
You were running marathons in prison?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Just like running around?
Just running around the prison yard. Angola is one of the most impressive prisons in the fact of how large it is. It sits on 18,000 sprawling acres of land, covered 3/4 of the way by the Mississippi River. There's only a way in and a way out that comes, as far as the road that gets you there, and it's a 21-mile winding road to get you down in there. But yes, the acreage that is there is mind-blowing. They had an article that came out in National Geographic one time that says that the earth or the soil that is that of Angola is such that if you chopped a man's finger off and stuck it in the ground, you would grow up another human as a result of it. It's just that the soil is that rich. It's considered like the 11th richest soil in all of the world that's found there on that plantation. But
that plantation.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But in that moment, like I said, that was the last marathon that we would run. The one that I did prior to was Finish Strong. And in that moment, that was my message to the men in prison, because when I would put on the runs, I would get the graphic arts department to donate the T-shirts with the messaging on them. So men would wear the T-shirts all throughout the day, traveling through the prison. But as we saw each other or we encountered each other while we were in the prison, I would have to take note of the T-shirt. I would have to take note of the messaging.
Let me say this. Y'all out here making every damn excuse as to how you can't, why you don't, why you won't, why you ain't got, why you ain't doing, why you ain't getting, why you ain't growing, why you ain't showing up. You got all the why you ain't.
Okay.
And it's a man sitting here who gives you every reason to find a way.
That's it.
I am... Amen. I mean, girl, why they do that?
I ain't had none on.
I mean, amen. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
It is so. You know, it is so. Well, continue to do the work.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
If that blessed you, trust me, you've only scratched the surface. There's so much more wisdom, truth, and transformation waiting in the full conversation. Click the link in the caption below to watch the entire interview, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss an episode of Vaught Empowers Talks.